Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam.
Friends, today's topic that we are going to discuss is steps in decision making process and concept of relevant cost and benefits. Friends, both are the topics which are part of management accounting. So let us discuss first about management accounting. Management accounting is the application of professional knowledge and skill in presentation and preparation of accounting information. The purpose is to assist in planning and decision making and the control. Friends, management accounting not only provides internal reporting to the managers, but it also provides and compares performance for useful information in decision making before formulating major plans and policies of the business. Management accounting refers to managerial processes and technologies that are focused on adding value to a firm through identification of many opportunities before the business. It is attached to effective use of resources and thereby decision making on selection of the best course of action so as to achieve goals of the business and solve many business problems. Friends, all decisions are futuristic in nature. They involve a forecast of what the management thinks is likely to occur in near future. However, one should not forget that the future is highly uncertain, and similarly business decisions are surrounded by uncertainty. Hence, there are chances of prediction or decision taken may go wide of the mark. There are some routine decisions involving insignificant cost with very little uncertainty, and therefore they require very little time. While on the other side, there are some decisions involving considerable amount of money and they are surrounded by greater uncertainty. Therefore, they require considerable amount of time and thought. For example, profitable product mix, acceptance or rejection of special or export offers, make or buy, addition or elimination of a product line, sale or process further, operate or shut down. These are the certain decisions which are require very considerable thought from the management. Now friends, decision making is nothing but it's a process of choosing the best course of action among alternative courses of action available before the business. The most effective course of action is selected so as to achieve the goals of the business and solve business problems. Decision making also involves the comparison of cost of alternative course of action and hence it involves the concept of the relevant cost. Moreover, one of the most important operating decisions which is taken is pricing decision, because a firm's long range survival depends on its pricing decision, because the firm's prices must be sufficient enough to cover all cost and leave adequate profit for rewarding the investors as well as for firm's growth, development and diversification. Hence, decision making is a crucial process. Decision making is an integral part of all management functions, that is planning, organizing, coordination and control. Friends, today's topic which we are going to discuss is decision making process and concept of relevant cost and benefit. The objective of this topic is to select the most effective course of action which will be helpful not only to achieve business goals but to solve the business problems also. Hence, knowledge of stepwise decision making process helps in arriving at the best course of action among various alternative courses of action before the business. The second objective that we are having for today's topic is to arrive at the best alternative which is required to make comparison of cost as well as benefits involved in available alternatives. So, when this cost incurred for or benefits received from alternative choices are different, they become relevant cost or benefits. Thus, today's session will give insight about decision making process so as to select the best effective alternative and the role of relevant cost and benefit in decision making process. Let us first discuss prerequisites of decision making and then the steps in decision making process. First prerequisite is outlining all possible alternatives. If only 2 or 3 alternatives are considered and the best alternative from the considered alternative is to be selected, there are chances of missing some other available alternative which may be better than the selected alternative. It will involve an opportunity cost for the firm for the alternative which has not been considered. Hence, instead of comparing 2 or 3 alternatives, it is advisable to outline all the possible alternatives carefully and then select the best alternative among them. The second prerequisite is setting the objective correctly. If wrong objective is set, it can lead to the adoption of undesirable and unprofitable courses of action. Hence, it is required that all the objectives should be set carefully and correctly so that we can have a desirable and profitable course of action. To make decisions intelligently and skillfully, it is always advisable to follow the 4 steps. So, friends, we are going to discuss now the decision making process. The first step will be problems for which decisions are to be taken should be recognized and defined. The second step will be alternative ways of solving the problem should be identified. Third step will be alternatives should be evaluated through analysis of their cost and benefit, and the last step will be the most desirable and profitable courses of action should be adopted to solve the problems. So, there are 4 steps as we have discussed, that defining the problem, developing alternatives, evaluating alternatives and arriving at decisions. Now, let us discuss these steps in detail. Let us discuss the very first step, that is defining the problem. The first and the foremost step in the process of decision making is to identify the problem. In some cases, identification of the problem is fairly easy, but it might be more difficult in others. So, because the real problem is different from the apparent one. Hence, sharp and careful analysis, understanding and insight of the problem are required to articulate and define the problem. Friends, if the problem is well defined, the objective can be set carefully and correctly and to have a desirable profit and course of action. For example, we have to think about reduction in costs. Whenever we are thinking about reduction in costs, it will result into availability of ample profit margin. Step 2 is now developing alternatives. Once the nature of the problem is defined, factors causing the problem should be identified and alternative courses of action should be developed to solve the problem. In the initial stage, all alternatives or possibilities or choices can be listed. Then unattractive and irrelevant alternatives can be eliminated. Then it is advisable that alternatives should be narrowed down to 2 or 3 to prevent complex and clumsy analysis. Sometimes it may happen that there is availability of only one course of action. In such a situation, no alternative, no decision making. So, whatever is before you, that you have to select. Often there can be 2 possibilities, friends. The first possibility is to continue with the alternative which is presently practiced by the firm, and the other is to compare present alternative with the other developed alternatives. We continue of the example as mentioned in step 1. The problem was there in step 1 was reduction in cost would result into availability of ample profit margin. Now, development of alternatives, we are having the factor causing high cost of raw material alternatives available. First alternative, present alternative is in-house manufacturing, and the developed alternative is buying from the open market. After development of alternatives, they should be carefully evaluated on the basis of advantages and disadvantages, that is pros and cons inherent in them, that should be weighed and balanced for judging whether they are desirable or not. Even cost of and benefit from alternative should also be listed. advantages and disadvantages, pros and cons, cost and benefit of the developed alternative should be stated in the quantitative terms to measure consequences and to facilitate evaluation of the alternatives. For example, the proposed change in manufacturing method will result into reduction in raw material cost of rupees 20,000, an increase in labor cost, electricity charges of rupees 3,000 and rupees 2,000 respectively. So, reduction is considered to be advantage while increase in considered to be disadvantage. Hence, net advantage is of rupees 15,000. So, we are supposed to consider both reduction as well as increase. If they are expressed in qualitative terms, measurement of consequences may be difficult and hence evaluation may be impossible. In such a situation, evaluation of non-measurable consequences is essentially a judgmental process. For example, improvement in employee morale, increased vulnerability to competition, higher threat of technological obsolescence. So, these are the certain examples which I have to give. We further enhance the example of step 1 and step 2. The problem was reduction in cost would result into availability of ample amount of profit. Development of alternatives. Suppose the factor causing high cost is high cost of raw material. Alternatives available, number 1 is present alternative, that is in-house manufacturing. Second is develop alternative, that is buying from open market. Now, let us evaluate the alternatives before us. Suppose present alternative is in-house manufacturing, where variable cost is rupees 7 per unit and there will be no change in total fixed costs. The second is developed alternative, that is buying from the open market, and if you purchase from the open market, then raw material will be available at rupees 5 per unit. This was the third step. Now, the last step is arriving at decision. On the basis of evaluation of all the alternatives in terms of quantitative and qualitative effects, the most desirable and profitable courses of action should be adopted to solve the problems. Let us conclude the example discussed in step 1, 2 and 3. The problem was reduction in cost that would result into availability of ample profit margin. For that, we have developed alternatives. Suppose the factor causing high cost was high cost of raw material. There were two alternatives before us. Present alternative in-house manufacturing and the developed alternative is buying from the open market. Evaluating alternatives. First is present alternative in-house manufacturing, that is variable cost is rupees 7 per unit and there will be no change in total fixed cost. Second is developed alternative, that is buying from open market and the purchase price of raw material is rupees 5 per unit. Now, we arrive at the decision. Buying of raw material from open market would be the most desirable and profitable course of action with a view to have ample of profit margin through reduction in cost. This can also be represented graphically. From the graph, it is clear that there are 4 steps. Defining the problem, reduction in cost would result into availability of ample profit margin. Second step is developing alternatives. There are 2 alternatives, present alternative and developed alternative. Third step is evaluating alternatives and last step is arriving at the decision, and the decision is buying of raw material from the open market would be the most desirable course of action with a view to have ample amount of profit margin for reduction in cost. Now, we discuss the other part of the session, that is concept of relevant costs and benefits. In steps of decision making process, we have discussed the importance of quantitative factors for making decisions. If we talk about quantitative measures, cost data are the most crucial one that are needed for making decisions. All costs are not relevant in decision making. Hence, it is essential to draw distinction between relevant and irrelevant cost data. Irrelevant costs should be eliminated and the relevant costs should be taken into account for making decisions. In simple words, a cost is relevant if it is related to the decision under consideration, while a cost is irrelevant if it is not related to the decision under consideration. For example, there are 2 alternatives which are available and decision is to be taken on selection of the most desirable and profitable alternative out of two available alternatives. Suppose cost of one alternative is equal to rupees 100 and cost of other alternative is also equal to rupees 100. In this example, the same costs are incurred for both the alternatives. Therefore, they are irrelevant for decision making. Let us take another example. There are two alternatives are available and decision is to be taken on selection of the most desirable and profitable alternative out of two available alternatives. Cost of one alternative is rupees 100, cost of other alternative is rupees 150. In this example, different costs are incurred for both the alternatives and therefore they are relevant for decision making. Let us discuss first definition of relevant cost. Relevant cost means what? A cost which varies as a consequence of the decision is a relevant cost. For example, variable cost increases or decreases when a decision is made. Therefore, it can be said that those costs which change as a result of decision are relevant cost and hence variable cost is the relevant cost. Fixed cost does not change if the activity is expanded within normal capacity range and therefore, it can be said that those costs which do not change as a result of decision are irrelevant cost and hence fixed cost is the irrelevant cost. But it cannot be concluded that variable cost is always relevant cost and fixed cost is always irrelevant cost. As per the definition of the relevant cost, the important criterion is first check whether cost changes or not and then if it changes as a consequence of the decision, it is a relevant cost and if it does not change as a consequence of the decision, it is an irrelevant cost. Friends, relevant cost includes the concept such as differential cost, incremental or marginal cost and opportunity costs. Let us discuss one by one. A differential cost is the difference in cost items under two or more decision alternatives distinctively to different projects or situations. Hence, differential cost is equal to difference between cost of two alternatives. Now, the incremental or marginal cost means what? Incremental or marginal cost that varies between alternatives and ignores sunk costs. Sunk cost means what? That is costs which have been incurred, which cannot be changed and therefore are inappropriate to the business situation. Hence, incremental or marginal cost is a cost linked with producing an additional unit and normally incremental or marginal cost is equal to variable cost. The last is now opportunity cost. Whenever an organization decides to go for one alternative and it should not overlook opportunities for other alternative. Hence, opportunity cost is cost of opportunity forgone. Now, the concept of relevant benefits. Like relevant cost, relevant benefits are also used to evaluate different alternatives to make decisions. As far as relevant cost is concerned, the alternative having lower cost as compared to another alternative is considered to be the most desirable and profitable to solve the problem. While as far as relevant benefit is concerned, the alternative with higher income as compared to another alternative is considered to be the most desirable and profitable alternative to solve the problem. Now, let us have a look at definition of relevant benefit. Relevant benefits are additional gains or revenues when a particular alternative is selected to solve the problem. In other words, this is the additional income from the most desirable and profitable alternative over another. This additional income is relevant decision making process and hence it is known as relevant benefit. Let us take an example. A manufacturing plant has been offered a new project, but the new project requires more capacity than the plant currently has. The problem statement here is whether to expand the plant or turn down the new project. Suppose plant is expanded. The relevant benefit will be what? By choosing to expand the plant, the company will gain additional revenue and hence the revenues from the new project are relevant benefits, because the management will use this potential future earnings to make its expansion decision. Suppose plant is not expanded, the opportunity cost will be there, because by deciding not to expand, the company will lose this potential benefits, and lost potential benefits are often called opportunity cost, because the lost benefits are the cost of choosing not to expand. Like relevant costs, not all benefits are relevant benefits. Only those benefits that are useful in decision making are considered as relevant benefits. Let us summarize today's session. This session was focusing on decision making process and concept of relevant costs and benefits. I am sure that this has given insight about decision making process so as to select the best effective alternative and role of relevant cost and benefits in decision making process. This session will help the students not only to understand theoretical background of decision making process, but its usefulness in solving practical problems found in business, because you have clear understanding about how selection of the most effective course of action among alternative course of action will be helpful not only to achieve business goals, but to solve problems also, as well as comparison of relevant cost as well as benefits involved in available alternatives will be important in arriving at the best alternative. This is the end of this session. We will discuss about various decision making situations found in normal course of business in sessions to come. Thanks and have a great time ahead.